Today on Let Them Talk TV, not only will you learn how to improve your English pronunciation with some indispensable rules, but you will also learn why we pronounce English as we do. I promise that by the end of this video, you will see the English language in a new light. Once you follow the logic, you will be able to apply this method to English as a whole, rather than learning the pronunciation one word at a time. This is a game changer, and if you're ready, then let's do it. The first thing is to learn the spelling and pronunciation rules. Yes, there are some rules, it sounds obvious, but when we're teaching English pronunciation, we often focus on the irregular because there are so many exceptions, as I'm sure you know. This word is pronounced women. Sword has a silent W. It's enough, but though. And I've made many videos on this subject, but did you know that more than 70% of English words follow rules? And let's have a look at just a few of them. There are many more, but here are just one or two. Words ending T-U-R-E are pronounced cha, creature, moisture, feature, capture. Now you say the sentence. They'll capture the creature in the picture in the future. Very good. There are one or two exceptions. Mature was the only one I could think of right now. AGE words are pronounced idge, manage, average, advantage, package, vintage, heritage. Say this sentence. They managed the storage of the vintage package. However, words of one syllable are pronounced age, page, wage, rage, age. There are very few exceptions to the rule. I can think of reportage, but that's not an everyday word. If you have one vowel before a double consonant, then it's pronounced as a short vowel. I remind you that the long vowels are also the names of the letters A, E, I, O, U. But these vowels have short versions. A, E, I, O, A. Let's look at some examples. Apple, battle, better, written, robber. Say this sentence. The story of the battle for the apple was written on the robber. And that's why we double a consonant to make it a short vowel. Write has one T, but written, two T's. Bite, bitten, etc. The double consonant shortens the vowel. Words ending ITY are pronounced itty. Say this sentence. The density of gravity in the city. The only exception I can think of is fruity, where the I is silent. If you need to improve your pronunciation, I want to introduce you to the sponsors of today's video, Elsa Speak. It's an app that has some really interesting features. It uses cutting-edge AI to analyze your pronunciation and intonation and gives you feedback. There are 1,600 lessons covering a wide range of topics, and let's just choose one for this demo. When you're ready, it presents you with a little dialogue for you to read out, and then the AI in the app gives you a percentage score based on how well you compare to a native speaker. Here's an example.
I'd like to make a dinner reservation for 8 people, please.
Certainly. Would it be for this evening? What time would you like? And your mistakes will be highlighted in red. And if you click on the red, it'll show you how to say that part correctly. Now, don't freak out if you don't get 100%. I'm a native speaker and I get in the mid-90s, and that's because there are so many different native accents. Just focus on raising your score and reaching a higher level of fluency. It's interactive and fun. And there are two links in the description. One is for downloading ELSA and getting 7 days pro membership for free. And the other link gives exclusive discounts of 40% off of 1 year membership and an amazing 85% off of the lifetime membership. And thank you to ELSA Speak for sponsoring this video. How do you pronounce this? I lived there for 4 years. Did you pronounce for and for the same? Native speakers will usually pronounce them differently. In English, there are substance words and helper words. The helper words just lubricate the sentence and make it conform to the rules of grammar, while the substance words convey the meaning. Look at this sentence and you tell me which are the substance words and which are the helper words. How would you pronounce it? So pilot, passengers, arriving, conference are substance words. The, and, or, a, are the helper words. Now, these helper words have two pronunciations: strong form and a weak form. For example, for is the strong form and f is the weak form. And native speakers will usually use the weak form. The exceptions are when the word comes at the end of a phrase, such as, who are you waiting for? I'd love to. Or if it's stressed, I want you to do it. Or if you're speaking slowly. So I'd pronounce this sentence like this: the pilot and the passengers are arriving for a conference. Now you try it. These words on the screen have both strong and weak forms. I'm not going to talk about all the weak forms because I've already made more than one video on them. But in this video, we'll just look at 3 of them. So for is usually pronounced fur.
To sword fight and do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I did a lot of training for that.
So how would you pronounce these sentences? For a long time. I did it for many reasons. This is for Alice. Very good. By the way, for and for all the weak forms, there is a common misconception that these are slang forms or informal speech. Not at all. They are used in the most formal of situations too. It's all about the message and making sure that the listener hears the words of substance in the sentence. Let's just look at 2 more cases. Here's your challenge. How do you pronounce this sentence? The criminal was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Once again, if you pronounce two and two the same, most of the time you'll pronounce two as t. The criminal was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Did you notice I also said was for was, which is another weak form? Try saying these sentences. Give it to me. I don't want to do it. To be or not to be? That is the question. Now that's interesting. Normally, you'd pronounce it t, because of course you want to emphasize be and not the infinitive marker to. However, if you're giving the soliloquy really slowly, then you have no choice but to say to, because you cannot linger on the t. You can't say t, be or not to be. No, that not at all. You can't. So that's why you'll hear both versions, but non-theatrically, it'll always be to be or not to be.
To be or not to be? That is the question. To be or not to be? That is the question.
Even as a prefix, to is pronounced t. Today, tomorrow. I promise you a third example, and here it is. Of is pronounced of. Say this sentence. It's part of the problem. The reason I mention this is because sometimes non-native speakers say of, but it sounds like off, which can be confusing. So try to say of if possible.
And where they come from. And I started telling the story of the early Greek gods. The story of the early Greek gods.
Let's move on to the next rule, but you might see that it's connected to the weak forms rule, and this is the correct pronunciation of TH. This will be easier for speakers of some languages that have the TH sound, such as Spanish and Greek and Arabic, while many others don't. German, French, Japanese, they don't have that the sound. However, whatever your first language, you should be aware that there are two TH sounds, the voiced TH and the unvoiced TH. And there are rules for when to pronounce each one. First of all, let's look at how to pronounce them very briefly. The voiced TH has this phonetic symbol, and you'll find it in words such as the, this, that. In order to pronounce it, make an sound. Okay, can you do that? Okay, the vibration comes to the back of the mouth and it's making a humming sound. And now continue with this sound, but then make the sound come from the front of your mouth and between your teeth. And then say the TH words. This, that, then. You got it? For the unvoiced TH, just exhale like this. Then put your tongue between your teeth and blow. Think. Athlete. Thank you. Okay, you got it? Well, try that at home. But how do you know when a word is a voiced TH or an unvoiced TH? And as I said, there is a connection with weak forms we just talked about. Have you seen it yet? If you remember, I said that some helper words have weak forms, okay? Well, have you ever noticed that the common helper words with TH are pronounced with a voiced TH, while substance words have an unvoiced TH? By substance words, I mean nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. So, for example, the helper TH words include this, that, these, those, them, themselves, they, their, therefore, either, neither, another, together, other, though, although. Notice that, them, than, themselves not only have a voiced TH, but also have a weak form. In addition to the helper words, you'll also find the voiced TH in family names, mother, father, brother, and in words ending THE. You have a bath, but to bathe. A breath, but to breathe. Cloth, but to clothe. Teeth, but teeth. To loathe. To loathe, by the way, is a synonym of to hate. A swathe. And a swathe means a large area of something. So, for example, swathes of the rainforest have been destroyed in recent years. But in almost every other case, it's an unvoiced TH. A thought, a thing, thistle, the theatre, a thief, thin, strength, apathy, birthday, truth, health. Exceptions. There are a few voiced TH sounds amongst substance words. For example, weather, to gather, feather. Not many. And very rarely a TH is pronounced as a T. These usually occur when two words merge into one or with real names, as I'm sure Mr. Thompson, the goat herder in the lighthouse in Thailand, will tell you. Sometimes when we are talking about pronunciation, we tend to focus on the individual words. However, equally important is the rhythm of the phrase. My final tip today is to focus on the phrase rather than the words. And in order to do that, you must be kind of blind as to how the phrase is written on the page. So instead, fix your mind on these things. Where are the consonants? Where are the vowels? And which is or which are the most important words in the phrase. Let's look at a sentence. How do you pronounce this? Often learners of English will try to pronounce a phrase like this, separating every word and give equal weight to each word. Was it a car or a cat I saw? But a native speaker will end on a vowel and start with a consonant. And if you do that, then the phrase looks something like this. Was it a car or a cat I saw? Note also that we have or followed by a, and in most forms of British English we would pronounce or as or without the R sound, but because the next word begins with a vowel, we add the R sound. So this is called the linking R. And there's also a linking R with car and or. And the words we want to stress in the sentence are car and cat. And if you haven't noticed it yet, that was a palindrome. Okay, here are a couple more examples. Say this sentence. The words we want to emphasize in this sentence may differ. Do you want to stress prison or 5 months? But let's say it's both. So then we'd say, you'd only been in prison for 5 months. Notice we use for and not for, as we saw earlier. One more example. Now, what do we stress here? It could be oat milk, if that's the thing that you've run out of and not anything else, or it could be run out of if that's the only thing you're talking about, you're discussing oat milk. So let's stress the run out of. And by the way, in phrasal verbs, we stress the second word normally. So get up, break down, put off, etc. So how would you say this sentence then? We've run out of oat milk. In English, we like to have the consonant vowel consonant combinations, and that's why we have the linking R, so as to avoid 2 consecutive vowels. But you'll also add an R when one is not there, such as in this sentence. I saw a film today.
I saw a film today, oh boy.
Saw ends in or and it's followed by another vowel, and we don't like that, so we add an R. I saw a film. This is called an intrusive R. Sometimes we add a Y sound for harmony too, when there's no Y. I always, I am a man. We are the champions. 3 apples. Even within words, you'll hear some speakers will say opinion instead of opinion. Not every speaker adds an intrusive R or an intrusive Y. In fact, some don't like it at all, but it makes sense to do it to maintain the melody and the rhythm of the English language. So why not? Sometimes we add consonants, sometimes we take them away. Look at these sentences and tell me how you pronounce them. So leave out the T when it precedes a word starting with a consonant, okay? Get back, that's okay. And if we're speaking slowly, we might say that, but when we are speaking quickly, in order to maintain the consonant vowel consonant rhythm, we'll skip it. So it becomes get back, get down, Lemmy, trust John. This even happens with individual words. 6th, who can say that? 6th. So when speaking quickly, it may sound like 6, just the same as 6. This is the 6th time I've seen you today. Clothes, clothes. That's difficult, but it's often reduced like clothes in fluent speech. So you hear many native speakers saying, I put on my clothes. You can hardly tell the difference. I put on my clothes, I put on my clothes. Do note that there are still consonant clusters in English and many exceptions to this rule. So, for example, the plural S, if you've got consonants before that, then you'll probably pronounce them, depending on the context, musks. Okay, you have to say it like that, or crisps. So forget about what's written on the page and focus on the pronunciation of helper words, weak forms, and the TH, on regular pronunciations and the correct rhythm and the stress of English. That's all for now. Stay mellow. See you next time. Bye.